Hello, and welcome to the Humanistic Counseling, a podcast in which we discuss, analyze, critique, and celebrate both well-established and cutting-edge ideas across the field of humanistic counseling. I'm Brett Wilkinson, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Humanistic Counseling, otherwise known as JHC. I'd like to welcome Dr. Betsy Johnson, a crisis counselor for the Student Counseling Center at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where she earned her PhD in counselor education. Her research is focused on the intentional integration of affective development within counselor education. Today, we'll be discussing her 2025 JHC research article entitled Permission to be Human, a narrative inquiry exploring new counselors' growth in emotional awareness and attunement to self. Dr. Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
As detailed in the article, you and your colleagues conducted a narrative inquiry to examine the development of emotional awareness and self-attunement among novice counselors pursuing certifications in expressive arts therapy. So to begin, why don't you tell us a bit about the importance, in your view, of affective development for novice counselors?
Yeah. Well, this study came as the second part of my dissertation while finishing up my PhD at UTK. And I think within my experience there, I saw a real gap between maybe the world of academia and the actual role of being a counselor. Because I think the role of being a counselor is so very complex and demanding. We are asked to sit with people in their grief, their sadness, their anger, their urgency, and doing that multiple times a day and within systems that are complex and within a therapeutic relationship that is existing within those systems. And I think it takes a lot to be able to learn how to do this. And I think that within training, we are also asking counselors to engage so much of their personhood. So not only are we asking the end goal to be something that requires so much ability to sit with yourself, to know who you are, to be self-aware, we're also then first asking you to maybe have a different relationship with the idea of certainty. We're asking you to step into ambiguity. We're asking you to deconstruct your value system, understand who you are, why you are the way that you are. We're asking you to engage with many new ideas. And also within a system that is critiquing you, you are also in many ways being assessed. How you're showing up in that space is being assessed. And that's a lot of pressure. So I think having intentionality in how we as counselor educators understand what counselors are bringing into this space, what relationship they already have to their affective selves or the way they make sense of their emotions, and then also the skills that they need to develop in order to be able to do this with other people and help other people move towards emotional wellness. And that should really be a process that is scaffolded. That should be a process that is paced for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you're highlighting all these complex elements that come into this process. I mean, there's so much happening in the educational process for counselors in training, and you're articulating this. And you also have this question, how do you think the emphasis on embodiment, in particular from your paper, how do you think the emphasis on embodiment in the expressive arts uniquely influences and shapes the development of affective awareness?
Yeah, well, emotions are happening in our body. It's our body trying to communicate with us to help keep us safe and make connection and find a belonging. I think, well, first of all, I will own that I am no expert within expressive arts, only have a very deep appreciation for what it offers the field of counseling and other helping professions. From what I understand of it, um, it is inviting people into play and ambiguity. It's asking people to sit with curiosity with their inner experience and do that with creativity, without first labeling, but actually, I guess, sitting with some of the messiness of what information people's bodies are telling them and helping them express that, hopefully in a new way, in a way that maybe helps them look at their feelings with more curiosity without having to immediately label them or sometimes judge them. Or I don't know, I think often in our culture we divide emotions into bad or good. So it's, I think, creativity and expressing things in a way that's maybe not just through language allows us the opportunity to step away from that moralization of emotions.
Very good. And so you cultivated a study, developed a study. It's a qualitative study. We're going to examine the 5 themes. Can you tell us a little bit about the setup for the study, the structure methodology? Can you give us a little bit of that?
Absolutely. So I was following a narrative inquiry, which seeks to find, I guess, an overall experience of something through finding themes within people's experiences and sort of co constructing a narrative of what that experience is. So I grounded my study within the theory of embodied cognition, which sort of looks at the ways that we make sense of the information that our body gives us. Um, I guess for me, I sort of understood this to be, I've got it written down here, looking at sort of the beliefs that we carry around, the role of relation of our emotions, um, the role of social relationships and how that informs how we engage with our emotions, the experiences that impact our relationship with that affect, and experiences that we have. So um, I went through a couple rounds of coding. First, based within embodied cognition, I had deductive codes in which I went through all of the stories and interviews with my participants and did this alongside a fellow researcher. And then, secondly, did inductive coding. We're just kind of going through and finding the themes that we found within their stories. And first, starting out, I guess, with recognition of dissonance, I think within each participant's story, there was this time that they had where they experienced emotions not being safe. I think as little human animals, we come to this world seeking belonging and relational safety. And we learn very quickly that there are ways to be accepted and belong, and there are ways that aren't. And sometimes the affective information we're receiving keeps us from that. Um, like, oh, it's not okay if I express anger, or people don't respond very well when I'm experiencing sadness, or anxiety and how people respond to that. They just tell me not to feel that way. And that creates a dissonance. Their body is giving them information, but that information keeps them, or at least seemingly keeps them from the experience of belonging. And so within each of the participants' stories, there was a moment where they recognized, oh, my body's giving me information, but that information isn't safe if I'm truly seeking to have belonging in my social or cultural groups.
Right. And so that's the dissonance that arises. The dissonance is what arises the conflict between here is the affective state, and here is the messaging from the environment. These two are in conflict. I cannot bring or share this feeling in this environment. It's unsafe to do so, and so then they are left to. Was there any articulation what they had to do with that, or is it a sense of suppression?
So many different things. I think each participant had their own way in which they navigated that dissonance. Um, I think one person described it as things were just swept under the rug and everybody had to go away from one another until they could talk about it in a really cognitive way. One person described maybe some like spiritual bypassing that would happen within being within a Christian community and how they would just be told, well, the Bible says don't be anxious 365 times, and them having to sit with, well, I think I still feel anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I did ask participants to, I guess, ways that expression came into their life before and after their program within expressive arts, and very commonly, um, some form of expression kind of functioned as a way of coping for them, a way of
Ah, yes. Okay, good. And then your second one here is experiencing acceptance.
yeah. So each person had a different story with how they experienced some sort of relationship in which they didn't actually have to name an emotion or be able to speak clearly about how they're feeling, but still experiencing acceptance or some sort of curiosity, safety, some sort of psychological safety they had within relationship, no matter how they showed up. For some people, that happened for their first time going to a counselor. Sometimes it was in friendships. For each person, it was a little bit different, but each had a moment that was incredibly impactful on when they first had some sort of relational experience of safety and acceptance, no matter what feeling they presented or expressed.
And did you find in some way that this sense of acceptance changed their relationship to their own affect and their affective development?
Yeah, it was all of a sudden, it was. okay to not necessarily hide or immediately jump to moralizing their emotions, having to say, well, this is bad, and having those meta emotions of shame show up.
Mhm. Okay. So you have this, we have the recognition of dissonance, the conflict that occurs between what's happening inside of me and the messaging or what's allowed in the environment, how we manage that. You got relationships where the counselor training experiences acceptance and this can morph their way of engaging with their affect. Then you have engaging with ambiguity.
So, this was my favorite theme because I think it showed up in so many different ways, um, both within their own experiences with emotional information or felt information, as well as their identity as counselors or becoming counselors. Because I was meeting with novice counselors, so people who were either in their internship or within their first couple years of practicing, they were still kind of in this liminal space of understanding their identities as counselors as that intersected with all of the other identities that they held.
Mhm.
So, engaging with ambiguity, there was this safety and acceptance that then allowed them to ask questions, to approach things with curiosity, to not have to know immediately, to not having to sit with an exact word or label, but it being just sort of unknown, being in the liminal space, being in the in between, and having tolerance for it, being able to tolerate not knowing what something was, not knowing what it meant to be both a mom and a counselor, or not knowing necessarily what to do with a client, being in a space and being unsure of what to do with them in the time they had with somebody, but being able to sit with that and tolerate that feeling.
Yes. It's such an important skill to be able to sit in a space, this, as you said, this liminal space of not knowing. What were some of the things that came up for these participants when they articulated um, uh, maybe the positive and negative challenging aspects of confronting the ambiguity and the constructive feelings that arise when one feels like they can be in ambiguity? Did that come up?
Yeah, I mean, I think many people talked about just the initial anxiety, I think,
Mhm.
of not knowing what to do with something, feeling the pressure of um, goodness, the variety of pressures they can experience, and needing,
Right.
like even writing your theoretical orientation paper and still
Uh-huh.
sitting in between something, um, or still having to work with clients, show up, be present with things while things still feel unknown. I think some of the positives that came from it was being able to step away from maybe some of the shame that can often come with the experience of emotion, some of those meta emotions, like, oh, what if I
Yes.
didn't immediately have to moralize this? Or what if I actually could be safe, like I'm still safe and okay, not knowing the answer to this question?
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and so I, talk with my students about this too, and this notion that if we can stay with a feeling long enough to allow ourselves to engage with and relate to it instead of just react to it,
Yeah.
then we can be in a space where things become less defined, but we can actually survey the sense of our feeling in our body in a more robust and accurate way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it is the fleeing from the feeling and the uncertainty that into cognition or avoidance or whatever that prevents us from becoming familiar with the sense that the feeling and the body are not something to be afraid of.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the embodied knowledge that comes from the experience of that, I think, unless you truly experience that safety within your body and sitting with the ambiguity, you're going to avoid it.
Right, right. So then so we have recognition of dissonance, experiencing acceptance, engaging with that ambiguity, and then you move into attunement to self. Tell us about that.
Each participant had such a beautiful, I guess, moment or collection of moments where it felt safe to actually listen to what their body was telling them, to actually respond in the moment.
Yeah.
within a therapeutic setting to something that was happening for them in the here and now with somebody, or even in their own personal development. There being a deeper level of their own self acceptance of
Mm.
how they were feeling, how they were responding. Um, Even when it came to like being able to bracket feelings or understand when and how to differentiate themselves when with clients. Like one person spoke to like sometimes their immediate need to go in and fix something, and her ability to like sit with that feeling in herself and know how and when to bracket that feeling in order to actually
Right.
be present with the person.
Yes. And so that sense of, maybe I'm reaching here, but the sense of familiarity that can grow, or the ability to be with the feeling, the capacity, as that capacity grows, and one can move, it sounds like, into a greater sense of self-attunement at the same time. Is that part of what you're pointing to?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that actually moves into the last theme of adapting, of
Mm.
people all of a sudden being able to have a new relationship with their affective selves. Um, and that showing up within their therapeutic work, that showing up within their own personal relationships, that showing up in their relationship to themselves, of them really being able to sit with more complexity and not have to immediately jump to a conclusion.
And what do you think about the importance of this notion of adapting for counselor training?
I mean, it's, I think, in some ways, the ultimate goal of what we're aiming for people's ability to experience growth and comfort with themselves so that um, they have that embodied knowledge so that they're able to then go do that with other people. I forget who the quote is by, but like we're only able to help other people engage with the darkness that we're okay with within ourselves. And
Yes.
so I think that um, that takes an ability to adapt and change our relationships we have with our emotional information, I think.
Certainly does, yeah. And that darkness within ourselves doesn't have to be framed as something that's necessarily negative or shadow. It can also be framed as just that which is in the shadows, off radar, out of your awareness, because you haven't turned to or given opportunities to, as you've outlined here, uh, in, be in the dissonance and move through and engage with ambiguity and learn to attune and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd also like to touch on here the idea that there are challenges that many students face, I think, particularly within modern society, opportunities to develop the affective resilience and awareness that you're pointing to. And I wonder if you could speak to that, some of the challenges that you see within the broader culture, also within the counseling training environment, too, what students are bringing in to counselor education programs.
Yeah, I think we can't ignore the context in which we're all living. We do live in late stage capitalism, in which I don't think is meant for our little human bodies. It involves also a lot of, I guess, technology and social media that creates more separation, um, less opportunity to engage with one another. I primarily right now work as a crisis and intake clinician at a counseling center. And so I work with a lot of students who have just not been given many opportunities to just be with people and experiencing their body give them information and being able to co-regulate with other people, which I think is kind of how we learn those skills. So
Mm-hmm.
especially with college age students who are experiencing so many new stressors within the context of the uncertainty that exists within our culture now, they're just not given the tools to know how to tolerate or be with those feelings. And that does show up in the classroom too. I think, especially with so much dissent amongst people, it can even feel sometimes unsafe to engage within a classroom, not knowing what someone believes or how is it safe for me to engage with this person. And what parts of myself is it okay to engage within this space? How much of myself can I bring?
Yes. And so, and part of what it seems like you're pointing to is when you say that the opportunities aren't there in the same way they have been before, we have so much engagement across social media where there's not a face to face communication. So much of this affective attunement occurs in real time, in the engagement, in the interruptions, and the spaces and conversation. It's very dialogical in that way. And
Yeah.
so, Uh, it sounds like you're pointing to the media technology environments that we operate within now have become a significant barrier to students bringing the skills in that they may need into the classroom. You're seeing that as a crisis counselor. But then they come into counselor education, it would seem that we would need to do perhaps double time now as educators, that there's more need than ever for us to be more intentional about how we are attending to affective development with our students because of the sociocultural milieu we're in. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm thinking about how often it's taken for granted, counselors being, I guess, experts within emotional wellness, and how I guess we shouldn't take for granted what it takes to be able to understand that, or to be with that, or um, to understand it in a from a ground up level. Like, what are the first beginning steps to being able to attune to yourself? And how do I not just understand that for myself, but help guide somebody in that? Um, how do I sit with somebody who's incredibly dysregulated? What are the very first how to things that I do to help them be more grounded?
And would you agree that if I were to say you can't expect a student to be able to go in and effectively work with a client who's dysregulated if they haven't learned some of the foundational skills to regulate themselves?
I would say no. Even in thinking about like what's even happening, like a lot of what we do as counselors is help other people co-regulate. Like our bodies are actual tools that we're helping. And so if we ourselves aren't regulated, then that's probably not going to happen as effectively.
So, what implications and critical ideas? You could wrap this up as your big takeaways, because you have, it seems, some big hopes for how we can modify things in counselor education, or how pedagogues can frame things and think about the process of training. What do you hope the listeners will take away from your work?
Well, I hope first and foremost, knowing that learning is happening within our affect, like we have to be affectively engaged before real learning is going to take place. And I guess this is really my own personal beliefs or values, but that is a relational process. That is something that's going to happen through genuine relationship and connection. And especially within counselor education, which is already, I think, foundationally a relational thing. It's something that is happening, it's deeply personal. And that learning is going to happen when people experience that safety within a learning environment in order to engage with that part of themselves and relate to other people. So I would hope that people begin to be intentional in how they invite people to engage with their body within the classroom. How do they incorporate an understanding of what information their body is giving them while learning things? Um, I hope that's also brought into supervision. I think that supervision is such a prime place to be able to bring that into as well, where we're actually getting to have one on one or group settings where we're having really intentional conversations around what's happening in the space with clients. Um, I also think that it can be such a valuable tool, especially within our current cultural and political landscape, where we're asking people to still deconstruct their own values and beliefs around how they see people and how they understand um, their own identities within that context. And I think when we first encourage people to attune to themselves and be able to sit with and tolerate hard feelings, they're then going to be able to have more productive and complex conversations and learning.
Absolutely. Well, last question here. What do you think is particularly valuable about humanistic counseling?
What isn't? I think it's the foundation of the profession. I think anything that takes into consideration the whole person and that is ultimately seeking holistic wellness for people. Um, I think that the more that we find out about our bodies, the more we incorporate neuroscience, the more we learn about our nervous system, I think we find the deep wisdom that is already within humanistic counseling, that um, safe relationships that are built on empathy and unconditional positive regard and the ability to be authentic are the things that really enable change to happen.
Absolutely. As a fellow scholar with interest in embodiment and self-awareness development and affective attunement development and an interest like you in embodied cognition, I want to say that you've made a tremendous contribution to the humanistic literature with this study, and I want to thank you for that. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today, Dr. Johnson. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much.
And many thanks to you, good listeners, for spending time with us here at the Humanistic Counselor Podcast. All JHC articles can be accessed through the Wiley Online Library. If you're a member of the Association for Humanistic Counseling, then you get free access to this article and many, many others through the American Counseling Association website at www.counseling.org. If you'd like to become a member of AHC, then we hope you'll visit our website at www.humanisticcounseling.org. Thank you, be well, and hope to see you here next time on the Humanistic Counselor Podcast.